This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Dr. Debi Silber, and she is a repeat customer of the podcast, a repeat appearance. And she is the founder of the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute. She's done a TEDx talk. She's been on Fox. She's been on CBS. She's been on the Dr. Oz show, and she is a rock star, and she's going to help us get unstuck if we've been betrayed. Hello, Dr. Debi. How are you?
Thank you so much. I love being a repeat podcast person.
I know. I was like, what word for that? Yeah. And it is in this world, and I'm sure you're like me. Sometimes we have more in common with the people we're podcasting with and that thing than the people who are kind of in our neighborhoods or some of that.
Oh, I so get that. It's so funny because there are so many days I don't even think I leave my office. And then if I do go out and go somewhere, I'm like, wow, this is what people do. Like,
I know. Vitamin D.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, okay. So you specialize in getting past betrayal, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what usually comes up for people when they get stuck after being betrayed?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Well, first of all, if you have a repeat betrayal, it's a sign clearly of an unhealed betrayal. I mean, it keeps coming up because there is something needed to be learned. I'm not suggesting at all that it's your fault. It's your opportunity. But what happens is think about it. When the person you trust the most proves untrustworthy, who do you trust? When the one you run to when other people are causing harm is the one causing the harm, what do? Trust is so foundational. So when it's shattered, it's traumatizing. And it takes a very specific protocol to heal. You cannot just think time will heal this. I did the research. I have the proof. It does not work. It hits us on every level, physical, mental, emotional. So it needs to be healed on every level.
Mm-hmm. And how do we start that healing process?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is you want to know what stage you're in. And out of the three, I did this study on betrayal, made 3 discoveries. One of them is that while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, fully and completely heal, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And we know what happens physically, mentally, emotionally at every stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So when you know what stage you're in, then it's a question of, okay, here's where I am. And so what you're saying is I just have to do this to get to the next stage? Yes. So healing is absolutely predictable. But check your willingness, because one of the biggest needle movers I see for people is willingness. And I know we talked about stuck, like getting stuck and getting unstuck. And I'll tell you, you may think to yourself, well, of course I want to heal. Oh, no, you don't. Check that resistance, check your willingness, because even in the study, I thought the people who were the hardest hit would grow the least because they had the most to overcome. That had nothing to do with it. It was the people who put their heads down saying, you know what, I'm just going through this and I am not picking my head up until I am out the other side, blew the doors off of others who were numbing, avoiding, distracting, doing other things. So check your resistance, check your willingness.
Oh my gosh. And people ask me about how I healed from my own situation. And I said, I had already lost so many years. I was determined not to lose anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's really the answer I can give them. I had just decided I wasn't going to lose any more years, but that's that willingness and that determination of like, I've already lost so much. Am I going to give it more? Like, am I going to do another 10, 20 years?
Well, and you know what? It's so true what you're saying. And here's the part that is mind blowing to me. One of the discoveries was that there's actually this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. But these symptoms, and I may have even shared this on the last time we spoke, these symptoms, which people walk around, let's say hypervigilant, or they can't sleep, or they have a gut issue, or they're just anxious, they're depressed, whatever. It's not necessarily from something that happened recently. It could be from something that happened, I'm talking decades ago. So now imagine that person may not care, remember, or even know what they did. And here we are, right? Walking around with the effect, with these symptoms from something for decades. Like, look at the amount of power we give away when we do that. And that is completely up to us to change.
And Debbie, I had a betrayal. I'll call it a little B betrayal recently. You know, there's been big B betrayals in my life, but just a friendship that I'm just so disappointed in. I mean, you know, there were some things that, I mean, a way that she, you know, in the past, we both have kids, and I had like really worked hard to protect her kids against harm in a certain situation. And then it came up an opportunity for her to protect my kids against harm. And she didn't.
Ooh.
Okay. And this
In
wasn't the first
Yeah.
circumstance, right?
Oh, see, that's a rough one. Because you know what it is, and any parent will know, as bad as it is of what you do to me, you do something to my child. Ooh, that's when the mama bear thing comes out. It's so upsetting because, well, you know what happens too? Whenever we expect someone to act with the level of integrity or consciousness as us, you know, we may very likely be disappointed. And what I find when you really look at somebody, they're typically pretty consistent. And, you know, I talk about in both of my books, many, I talk about the, like my family, you know, my family betrayal. And I remember one day where I have a bunch of dogs, and I looked at them, and it struck me as like, wow, you know what? I would never expect my dogs to not act like dogs, like they're dogs, right? That's just what they do. Why am I expecting anything other than what I always see? That's on me. Right? And it's hugely disappointing, but it becomes less disappointing when you see how predictable and how, you know, just how common it is that's the way they're going to respond from where they are right now.
And I want to point out to our listeners that sometimes that predictability can be unpredictably or predictably unpredictable, right?
Mhm.
And so, and I know you're familiar with that. You're like, oh yeah. Because some people might be listening and say, but sometimes they say they're sorry and bring me flowers and, you know, offer to watch my kids or bring me a present or tell me they love me. And then other times
Yeah.
they this, but that is its own pattern of predictability sometimes, right?
Well, yeah, and that's called love bombing, because that's, you know, I mean, that's designed to keep you off kilter. That's like, uh-oh, I pushed too far. Okay, let me just do whatever it is to get them thinking everything's okay again, so I can go back to my behavior and they're okay with it. That's, you know, that's a whole, like you said, that's a whole different thing, where it's like, I did something, and it's not because you really like remorse, guilt, empathy. It's more like, oh, okay, I'm gonna lose this thing I had, and this amazing situation. So let me just, what do I need to do to make them think, you know, everything's okay? Now, of course, sometimes, depending on the relationship, there is deep remorse, regret, empathy. That's a whole different thing. I'm talking about the unpredictable, predictable thing you're talking about, where that is that person's way of just, you know, getting you back, but then keeping you off kilter.
Absolutely. So I love that you said about the willingness. And I think that's the one thing I'm starting to hear more and more people, especially in the some type of dating or romance or love space, really talking about. And not as many people anywhere in the other spaces that I'm noticing talking about, which I find really interesting. But it's like, well, do you really want to be healed? Do you really want to be loved? Do you really want to get past that? And so many of us are living in stress addiction, right? Where we get, because I love what you said, and bring it back to what you said earlier about that repeat betrayal. And again, I second it, this is not victim blaming, right? But you know, if there's a pattern in your own life of these things, it could be partly due to stress addiction, self-sabotage, and maybe needing to have different skills, knowing who to trust.
That, I mean, all of that. Yes. So, and this is so classic out of the 5 stages. This is total stage 3. I mean, that's why I wrote From Hardened to Healed, because trust again has the 5 stages, but everybody was getting stuck in stage 3. So From Hardened to Healed is just for stage 3, because you've been through the worst of it already. I mean, you owe it to yourself to move completely through the stages. But here's the thing. I really invite everybody to consider, what's the benefit of staying stuck? And now I know everybody's listening. They're like, benefit? What is she talking about? Think about it. You get so much from staying in that stuck place. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You get a target for your anger. You get sympathy from everybody you tell your story to. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Right? So you get a lot from staying there. You get a certain type of relationship that it's the misery loves company crowd. But yeah, so you get that. And on some level, that feels good compared to, because you don't know what's waiting for you when you give that up. You know what it's like? It's like, let's say someone has 20 pounds to lose and they're like, it's okay. It's okay. And they justify exactly where they are. It's fine. That kind of thing. They don't know what it feels like with the 20 pounds off. So they're settling and trying to make it okay where they are. That's kind of the stage 3 thing. It's kind of that stuck place where it's like, it's not good, but you're resigning yourself to like, well, this is as good as it's going to get. So I better find a way to be okay with it. Be careful. This is also when we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy because we don't like it here, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. So we use these things to numb, avoid, distract. I did 2 TEDx talks. Actually, my first one, Stop Sabotaging Yourself, was about this exact thing. Why is it that, we may be headed in a good direction and we will derail ourselves so that we stay stuck? We don't like to think. Think about it. Thinking, is going to create change. Change is going to shake everybody up. We have it all figured out. And if we start changing, it's going to affect everybody.
Agree completely. And that's why so many of us are in overanalysis paralysis, right? And it's like, this terrible situation, they describe it and they're, talking about their victim story, right? And you can be a victim without living in your victim story, right? It doesn't mean I don't want anyone to hear this and think, but something really bad did happen to me. And it's like, yes, I recognize that. Is that going to be the most interesting thing that's ever happened to you?
Here's the thing. And like I had betrayals from all of the most important people in my life. And if I told you that story, I would get all kinds of sympathy. But when then you think about it, it's like, look what a better story you have when you do something better with it. And that's completely up to you. And I think people just don't understand the power in changing that story. We don't realize how strong we are. We have no idea the power of moving past our stuff. And even though something is comfortable and familiar, doesn't mean it's good. It only means it's familiar. But here's the thing, especially when it comes to betrayal, you have to be willing, and we talked about willingness before, to let go of your story and all the benefits you get from it, because betrayal really lends itself to creating a new identity. You take all the parts you love, you leave behind everything that no longer serves. And I just talked about this the other day. Imagine Legos, you have kids, right? Legos, but they love it. They create this whole big thing. Then, right, so imagine there's this big giant Lego structure. Doesn't mean it's great. Doesn't mean it's beautiful. Just means it's built, right? Now imagine the whole thing comes tumbling down. Healing from betrayal, the transformation piece of it, is where you deliberately and intentionally create something new. You don't have to use every piece, and you certainly don't have to build it the same way you built it before. You're like, I want this piece here. I want this piece here. Nah, I'm not going to use that piece. And you get to create something completely around who you want to become. That's transformation.
I agree completely. This week I sent an email out to my list, and I was talking about the article that I wrote right before I got married again. Okay. So I put in there, I'm getting married, and then this is written 3 years ago. But it was talking about all my fears of going into a new relationship, and some of those older things, I can never recreate that version of myself. Right. Because I'm not scared now. Like all those things have been worked out as they should be, 30 years ago. And I sent that out, and it was hilarious and sad that within 2 minutes of me sending that email, I had one person say, "How dare you make us all feel bad?" I had someone say, "You have no idea how much this meant to me. You saved my life tonight." Like literally, same email, 2 minutes, right? And one of those women is interested in rebuilding that transformation story. And one of those women are interested in hanging on to their own story. And sometimes I think we make healing, I don't want to say healing too hard. That's not exactly what I mean, but we make it harder on ourselves, right? And it's like, oh, there's no way I can heal. The scars last forever, the wounds and this. And it's like,
Well,
your opinion on that.
I love that you're saying that. This just happened to me. So I'm doing a course right now, separate course, and exactly the same thing. One person, big bold letters, how offended and how wrong, and she's not learning anything in this. And then here's somebody else saying, oh my gosh, I've never heard this. This is the most transformative stuff I've ever learned. And really what this comes down to is there are two types of people that I find anyway with healing from betrayal, because I find this is the hardest and the most transformative work you'll ever do. There's the one person who's like, all right, I'm going to just brace myself and whatever it takes. That's it. I'm going to look in those, dark crevices. I'm going to unearth all this stuff. I'm going to face it, feel it, heal it, period. Then there's the other person who's like, oh, no way. This is way too dark, way too scary. I don't want to look at this. And so instead of me saying, because I'm totally good with this, if you say, this is too big, this is too scary, I'm just not up for it now. Okay, know that it's not going to go away, but at least you know what you're dealing with. But instead, because then they'd be honest. And when trust is shattered, you have to rebuild self-trust too, because then at least that would help build self-trust. But instead, when you look at it saying, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You are this, that, whatever. That's just giving away all your power. Now I've seen this. I've been coaching for 30 years. I've seen this a million times, so I know what it is. But it's so interesting to me how, it's human behavior. It's like, you just touched a deep nerve. This is not light and fuzzy and I don't want to deal with it. So I'm just going to blame you. And all it does is give away your power and keep you stuck. And it follows you around like a shadow.
I had a lady this week not make any changes. She had no interest in making changes. It was the initial call. And her son had told her she needed to get a life. Okay. One would think that might set someone into motion, like your own child. Like you're just saying this as if it's like, and she's like, I don't have a life outside of my kids, but now they're getting older and this kind of thing. And then my son told me to get a life. And, I was like, well, do you think there's anything, is what you're doing working? No. Should you do something else? Yes. Okay, now let's do something else. No. Right? And that's what you see. I know you see it all the time. And it's like, but your own child is telling you need to do something else.
You know what I see with this too? Here's the thing. We never want to be without an identity. And with this woman that you're talking about, it could very likely be that her identity is this story and this no life, and this is it. And although she's not happy with it, we don't want to be without an identity. So if she can't imagine any other, anything besides that, she's not going anywhere. So the way around it is have them see a version of themselves who's a bit different, who's doing something, because then at least there's still fear, there's still the unknown, but at least there's an idea of, oh, okay, that's where I could move towards. It's almost like, you're on a trapeze and you hold on to the one bar and, there's another bar to grab onto. You're still not going to go anywhere until you let go of the first bar, but at least there's another bar to hang on to. And when they see that, at least there's more of a willingness. But I have seen this with health issues. I've seen this with relationship issues, even in the worst of scenarios. If they don't see the potential of something else, they're not leaving their situation for a minute.
Well, and she was very vocal about not leaving her situation for a minute. That was the whole first, she was like, no, I'm not changing. I'm not doing anything different, so it's kind of a Hail Mary, at the end, I guess. And she was very vocal and honest and upfront saying, no, I'm looking for help in managing my emotions so that I can stay here. I have no interest in moving somewhere else, that.
Oh, that kills me. That kills me. There's that, I was just working with a woman recently, and her husband has been betraying her the entire marriage. And and she's a wreck. I mean, when you're dealing with that, just physically and the physical symptoms, mentally and emotionally, I mean, it's awful. And it's like she wants to get sort of well enough so that she's okay with his behavior.
100%. I have seen that 100%,
Yeah.
usually, I mean, quite honestly, usually I can kind of filter those people out and just say that what I do is not a fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a therapist on the corner, and I'm not saying anything ugly about therapists. I'm saying there's a therapist on every corner that will listen to you talk about that for 15 years, and you don't have to move at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We are on the same page. And here's the thing, I'm a psychologist, but I am a coach first, and I will hear your story so that I can find the one little place we can do something to move you forward, even if it's 1%. But if you're so committed to that story, you and your story, at the end of the day, that's all you're going to have. And it's just so mind-blowing to me how people would rather have that story, but it's because they don't know what's waiting for them. And it's fear. And I'll just surprise them with a question. If you weren't afraid, what would you do? 2 seconds is the most obvious thing. So it's just fear. And then I'll say, okay, you have kids? Yeah. Okay. A son, a daughter. What's your daughter's name? I don't know. Jessica. Okay. What would you tell Jessica? It's the most obvious thing in the world. I'm like, okay, so if that's good enough for Jessica and it's the most obvious thing in the world, why is that not okay for you?
I have another lady, and she was afraid. And I said, my daughter, because of COVID, she just missed school, right? She just missed school and there was like reading and stuff. And I said, I paid for a reading tutor for her. Do you think that was a good decision or a bad decision? That's a great decision. I said, okay, moved her forward in her reading as a support structure for her. And then I said, she goes, that was a good investment. And then she said, but I can't invest in my happiness. And I was like, how are those two things? And she had just very much said, I have no interest in ever investing any amount of money. She'd just gotten a promotion too, Debbie. That's what was crazy. It was not, she had just gotten a promotion. She had plenty of money to do it. Yeah. It was just that mental block. She wasn't surviving or, trying to make her bill. She had just gotten a promotion, had all this abundance that the universe had given her, right, and was terrified to invest in herself in any way.
And just, and I really invite people to change the word can't to I'm unwilling. That's being honest, right? Because at least then I can't invest in my happiness. I'm unwilling to invest in my happiness. If you exchanged can't for unwilling, at least you're being honest there. And that's the thing. And then, what happens is we make these decisions out of fear. And then we start throwing all of this, whatever we justify, and we make all of these excuses to make our case solid. And again, it's not being honest with ourselves at all. Getting back to that first TEDx, I use these analogies. I had these 3 clients, and this is what it looks like. And I've in different categories. Like one was Claire. Now she was top of her field. Sounds like this woman too. Top of her field, making a ton of money, climbing the corporate ladder, and never got married, never had kids, married to the job. She sees me because her energy is down. We do a bunch of things, energy comes up, and all of a sudden, so does the clarity. And she realizes, oh my gosh, I've spent the last 25 years climbing the corporate ladder in a field I chose just to please my parents. This is all I've ever known. I hate this. But what do I do? So think about it, right? It would have been too big to do something else. So she goes right back to her work and sabotages her success. Or Margot, busy working mom, she comes to me for weight loss, emotionally eating. She goes to work, comes home, gets kids ready, over and over and over again, right? We do a bunch of things. The weight comes down, comes off. And all of a sudden she's like, oh my gosh, I hate my job. I'm not even sure I like my husband. What do I do? So what does she do? Instead of dealing with that, she goes back to the food, gains the weight, sabotages her success. And then I had this last one, this guy, Greg, And he would meet up with his friends every week, complain about his, the wives and the lives and everything. And then all of a sudden he's like, it's not fun if I'm not doing anything about it, just complaining. So he starts getting into personal development. And you're like a kid in a candy store when you start that stuff out. So he's so lit up. He wants to share this with his friends so they could do this together. But they're looking at him with that look like, oh no, he's crazy. So what does he do? He ditches all the personal development stuff. And when he meets with him, he starts drinking more, sabotaging his success. That's what we do. Because if we were to take that stuff on, we're either leaving our friends, we're leaving our work, we're leaving our current relationship, or it invites a change to it. It's too big. And we're like, not doing it.
I am so familiar, and I'm so glad we're talking about this. And we can do something else. There is hope, there is healing, and there are very distinct patterns. As you've talked about the stages, the interview I had before you was talking about the patterns of success, right? So success leaves clues, healing leaves clues. It's not that people are doing 500 different things. Like many of us are doing this process and the same process. So will you tell people where they can find out more about your work and more how they get your books?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, everything is at the PBT is in post-betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com. I mean, we have our quizzes. You can find out what stage you're in. You could see what symptoms you're struggling with post-betrayal syndrome. We have everything there, thepbtinstitute.com.
That sounds awesome. So Debi, if we got to broadcast you to the entire world for a minute, what would you say?
I'd say you're so much stronger than you think. You can heal from all of it. And you owe it to yourself to do something really good with something really painful.
That's awesome. Dr. Debi, thank you so much for helping us again. You guys have to check out her last episode. I'll put in the show notes which one it is. I definitely don't remember offhand. So you guys can check out more from her. And thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thank you.